Hello and welcome to this special edition of Vulcan Media. Today, AMD held a live stream giving a sneak peek of their new processor line, known as Ryzen, in reference to its codename Zen during development. The stream happened around 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, if I don't know the other time zones, but AMD, take away the benchmarks, fam.
They actually showed a good number of benchmarks at this live stream, and that I was definitely watching, just totally engrossed in it because I've been waiting this for a long time. So they started off the day with Blender showing AMD Ryzen, their 8-core 16-thread variant running at a flat 3.5 GHz versus an Intel i7 6900K, also 8-core 16 threads running at 3.2 GHz with a 3.7 GHz turbo, delivering the same exact performance. So that's really good first off for AMD, because that means, assuming that the Intel processor was turboed, that AMD is actually winning in IPC. But then again, there's always the margin of error, and we're not really going to know for 100% sure until we get the product into our hands to be testing ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Especially since this could be just we don't have the consumer version yet. It's still in the experimental phases.
Yeah. They said that there will be a much higher clock because of turbo at actual release. Just for now, it's running at 3.5, so you can expect even more performance eventually. So
Very impressive.
Oh yeah, so impressive. The next benchmark they led off with was Handbrake, an open source program that a lot of people use for video file conversion. Again, the same AMD and Intel processors. AMD finished at 54 seconds. And Intel processor finished in 59 seconds, which is a 9% difference. Now, I was reading the AMD forums, and some people mentioned that Intel's processor wasn't boost clocking during that presentation. So I did a little bit of math, and assuming Intel's processor wasn't boost clocking, so we're talking 3.5 GHz to 3.2, that would, assuming actual scaling with your clock speeds, that would mean that their IPCs are identical for that workload. And so, at worst case scenario, at Handbrake workloads, we're talking identical IPCs, which is awesome.
It's really good.
So, the next thing they went on was, they did a couple gaming things, we'll get to that eventually. The next non-gaming thing they did was ZBrush, which is a professional program for modeling and testing how light reflections are going to work on certain objects. Unfortunately, this is again a professional product, so we don't really know how it compares to very many other things. But it handled what they claimed to be 53 million polygons, and it was doing it pretty well as it seemed. So if that's a good indicator, we'll find out in the future. If I find any benchmarks online of ZBrush, then I'll include them probably in our next video.
And of course, as we've said again, this is just at 3.5 gigahertz. If this number, or when the consumer version comes out and this number of the base clock is higher as well as the turbo clock, you can expect to see even more polygons being rendered and more performance from that CPU, as we've already said.
Much more. Because that's the good thing about processors, is they generally scale well with clock speed, so
yeah.
That's exciting.
I'll talk about the streaming and playing on the PC. So AMD showed off Dota 2, which of course is a not very demanding title. Mostly all computers, even if not gaming related, can handle this game easily on a frame rate. Of course, it had no frame drops. The Intel 6700K, which is Intel's, I wouldn't say flagship, but their higher end CPU.
It does actually have the highest IPC out of any CPU they have, so if we're talking about that comparison, that's good.
Yeah. And it was clocked at 4.5 gigahertz for this test on Dota 2, and it actually got smacked. It got demolished. It dropped many frames while it was being shown on stream. The game performs well, however, on the 6700K, but nowhere near as well as the Zen processor performs. It
was really weird. So when the person was playing, if you saw his screen, it was smooth. And you looked at the screen, and it seemed like it was being played on my old laptop from 2010. It was bad. So it's not a streaming processor. It's something that just AMD can handle because of the higher core count than the Intel processor simply can't. Now I have to assume that if it was the 6900K, that it would have performed similarly to Ryzen again. But this does show that even if you are on a 6700K, there are gains to be had by upgrading.
Yeah. So for gaming, they tested out both titles, Battlefield 1 and Battlefront, as of course we know are EA titles developed by DICE. Both BF1 and Battlefront seem to run very well on each of the CPUs. They didn't release any specific settings for each of the games, but we can mostly tell that they were running at 60 FPS at Ultra.
They actually mentioned in video that they smacked all the settings to absolute maximum. So this is like higher than Ultra. This is custom Ultra, and it was running at 4K as well.
That's. I wish. I know 4K is still not attainable by all the masses today, but just seeing that a CPU that hopefully will be reasonably budget oriented, as well as can run 4K, is just a huge development in the tech world right now. I know my 8370 and my 980 Ti could probably not come close to 4K at the moment. So seeing that AMD is really stepping up their game with this new generation of CPUs is a really good thing to see, and I'm very excited.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about the gaming benchmarks that I thought was really cool is that there were actually less stutters on the AMD screen, or at least that's what I perceived over the stream. So this is more opinion now than actual facts. At least this little part here is. And I think that's because of two of their new features in their Sense MI package, specifically neural net prediction and smart prefetch. Basically what those two things do is they learn to predict what information you're going to need, and then they make it available before you need it, which is a really cool idea for a processor. That's probably why they were able to retain such a low TDP, which, by the way, is 95 watts versus the Intel 6900K is 140 watts.
Jeez.
You know, it's just there were less stutters because whenever an explosion happened or the game had to make a major calculation on the Intel processor, you know, it couldn't pump out the frames as smoothly. But AMD processor already had the information, well, at their fingertips. It was already there because of these two new features. And that's just totally awesome. So I think we're going to see most of the games with this processor, not in average frames, which I think Intel probably is still going to win at, but I think we're going to see the most gains at minimum frames because of these two technologies. So that's
it's
speculation.
Very promising. Yeah, even in the early development stages of this, and this system is going to get better and better over time, but in this development it's very promising to see, and it's not been done, or as I can tell, by any other company, or even been attempted by any other company.
So I mentioned their Sense MI package. There are 3 other technologies that come bundled with it besides neural net prediction and smart prefetch. Where there's pure power, which is basically a function. Pure power and precision boost, which are both functions of the fact that they put hundreds of sensors onto the die of Ryzen, which is, you know, using Lisa Su's words. It allows them to overclock and fine-tune specific parts of the processor based on what's needed and how the processor is performing in general. So if there's more headroom in the TDP or the TJ Max, or if there's more, or if it's not being used as much, it automatically saves power that way and makes it as efficient as possible. So, which is really cool. And then there's extended frequency range, which is kind of like an automatic overclocking feature. Whereas, usually, let's say you have an AMD Black Edition processor or an Intel K Edition chip, you can set higher multipliers in your BIOS. Well, what extended frequency range does is it automatically does that based on how much more headroom your processor has. It's very similar to GPU Boost 3. Just like many NVIDIA cards, the 10 series at least, come with base clocks of about 1700, but then end up boosting to almost 2 gigahertz. That's the kind of thing that we might be seeing with AMD's new processor, and I am so excited for that.
Yeah, so am I. getting into, I'd say, more of the opinion section of the video, talking about pricing. AMD has not come out with any specific prices yet. They've hinted that it's going to be around how much the 6700K is currently, which is about $260, or at least that's how much I got mine for on
But that was
Black Friday.
Micro Center though. That's a crazy deal. That's 1 second. Let me look up the 6700K. Like,
yeah, I think 350 was its original, or where it came down to instead.
Yeah, it's still selling for about 340 on like Newegg and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
but
hopefully that is my prediction. That is what a lot of people seem to think. Is it's going to be between that and the 6800K, which is about 400, 450.
Yeah.
So
and for performance,
that is going to be
nothing
legit.
close.
It's going to be legit.
Nothing comes close.
Especially when you compare it to the KB Lake benchmarks, which we're not really going to get too much into in this video, but let's just say they're almost identical to Skylakes. That's it.
Take a look at our video that's coming out on Sunday about all of the gaming and tech related news that happened during this week.
It'll probably be the past 2 weeks actually, because we meant to make one this Sunday, but it didn't happen. So
yeah,
2 weeks in one video. That's gonna be exciting.
We'll see what happens. And I think that really wraps up this video. Andy, do you have anything else to say, or did we miss anything?
Not really. I believe that's all they covered in the stream. If I'm wrong and I missed something, please leave a comment. Otherwise, dude, strap yourselves in. AMD's back.
Yeah, they are back indeed, and with a vengeance.
Oh yeah. So leave a comment, rate, subscribe if you'd like to. I don't own you. That's not legal anymore. That used to be legal. Assume, like, you know, there's a couple implications when I say that was legal. I really shouldn't get into this at all. I shouldn't have mentioned it, but it's too late. So.
Okay.
I'm really
Alright, see you. Take
man.
it easy. Yeah.
See you later, and happy Ryzen Day.
Yay.